But now I'm pleased to invite Mr. Robert Sung to provide us with his experience and thoughts on this issue. Please, Mr. Robert.
Thank you. My name is Robert Sung, as introduced. I'm CEO of Tuna Savarma Group. And first of all, I thank Dr. Fauzia and also the organizer for giving me this opportunity to present before the audience today. I think I need to explain about what we do at Tuna Savarma because it relates to what the message that I'm trying to convey. The next slide, please. The next slide, please. So in 1990, Indonesian government started a Trans-Papua initiative to develop the Far Eastern province, which was and still is lagging behind other parts of the country. The government simultaneously sought after entrepreneurs to develop a business alongside the Trans-Papua roads. To answer the callings from the government, Tuna Savarma was established in 1994 in Papua. And after long and careful consideration and also a suggestion, a recommendation from Ministry of Forestry in Indonesia, we decided to develop a oil palm plantation in Papua in 1998. And I'm proud to say that we have successfully developed a sustainable oil palm plantation there, which coexists and in harmony with the people and nature of Papua. Next slide, please. We can skip 2 slides there. The ESG, of course, we all know how important it is, and the financing, the new financing, the green financing, Professor Ishak Diwan just talked about. So I'm just going to skip that. But I just want to briefly touch upon the SDGs. Of course, Professor Justin Lin just explained, but next slide. We are all feeling the effects of this climate change these days. So the climate the actions or the environmental problems are undeniably important. But what I'm concerned about is that environmental aspect has been in the center of focus, but people may not be thinking about the other sustainable development goals developed by and created and publicized by United Nations. As you can see, as equally important as the environmental aspects are the poverty, hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, and so forth, especially in developing world. Next slide. So why do developing countries need sustainable development? I want to zero in on the Papua because of based on our close to 30-year experience there. Next slide. We have witnessed that in Papua, the infrastructure is extremely poor. Simply, there's just not enough roads and poor access to clean water or electricity, resulting in extremely high logistics costs, which in turn acts as a hindrance to further development. So basically, Papuan situation is in a vicious cycle, and we need to find a way to break out of this. Next slide. High poverty rate is also a big problem. Although Indonesian government has consistently tried and somewhat succeeded in lowering the poverty rate in Indonesia, things are still very bad in Papua especially. According to statistics in 2019, 27.5% of Papuans are believed to be living below poverty line. Next slide. The high infant mortality rate is an issue that I feel extremely strongly about. As a father of 2 young children myself, according to the report by UNICEF, for every 1,000 births in Papua, 27 babies did not make it past their first month, and 115 babies failed to reach their fifth birthday. These numbers are simply unacceptable. And the reason I believe is probably due to lack of access to modern healthcare facilities, services. Next slide. Illiteracy and lack of education is also a very serious problem. In 2021, 21% of people aged 15 years old or older in Papua cannot read or write simple sentences. Next slide, please. So how can sustainable investment change the lives of indigenous people? Let me just share our experience there. In witnessing these issues in Papua firsthand, we decided that we had to do something about this. As I explained before, the access to health services has been a critical problem to Papua region. So we started building and operating one hospital in Asiki and 6 clinics in the state of oil palm plantations. Out of these 7 facilities, we are treating about 9,000 patients per month, free of charge. And out of this Ashiki clinic, which was built in 2017, we have successfully delivered 344 healthy babies so far. Without Tuna Sarma's intervention in this healthcare sector, people must travel 3 hours by car to the nearest public health center in Muting, or 8.5 hours by car to get medical attention in hospital in Marauke, which is assuming the road conditions are as good as it is right now. But I highly doubt that will be the case if business operations of Tuna Sarma was not existing in that area. We have also built 42 schools in so far, and we are providing support for 170 teachers in those schools. And we have given out about 489 scholarships to students who are seeking higher education at universities across Indonesia. Next slide. So far, we have also created more than 20,000 jobs, and 25% of our workforce it consists of local Papuan people. And in addition to that, through our corporate social contribution program, we support local villagers to develop their own independent and sustainable businesses, such as chicken farms, fish farms, brick factories, and et cetera, et cetera. In recognition of our contribution to the society, former Regent of Bovendigo, Mr. Benedictus Tambonov, said this in a stakeholder meeting in 2017. In the past, when Papuan used to live almost naked, people saw and laughed at us as primitive. We have a simple wish. We want our children to get higher education. We want our children to be pilots or doctors. That's why we are ready to accept the development. Of course, environmental effect of our existence is also something we have to be very careful about. So in collaboration with one of the most prestigious universities in Indonesia, we are actively monitoring and researching better ways to preserve biodiversity in the surrounding areas of our operation. So hopefully I have convinced that even oil palm industry business can make many positive differences through sustainable development. I say even because of stigmatism against oil palm industry in the developed nations. But in Indonesia, we think differently. Our president, Mr. Joko Widodo of Indonesia, believes that palm oil business is useful and instrumental in sustainable development, badly needed in Indonesia, and especially in places like Papua. He said the palm oil industry has become a driving force for the community's economy. It has provided many benefits for the lives of Indonesian people, starting from helping improve the quality of life of rural communities, helping millions of small-scale garden farmers out of poverty, and providing access to education and information technology services. So, in closing my presentation, I would like to suggest that we all need to promote non-discriminatory view on sustainable palm oil business, and we need to build more trust towards national certification schemes such as Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil, also known as ISPO. And we need to reshape discourses that sustainable palm oil is not only good for Indonesian economy, but it is a win-win solution for global economic recovery and environmental conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robert, for excellent presentations. I have questions for three of you. Yeah. Now we have increasing concerns on climate change effects, but inseparably there are concerns on other global conditions, especially the global health situations, the impacts of Russia-Ukraine war, rising inflation and interest rates, and food crisis. So financing green transitions also requires huge amounts of funds, which is a super challenge, especially for the emerging and developing economies. We know that this should be a collective effort, but some can question the commitments from the advanced economies. So I have question to both Professor Justin and Professor Ishak. How are these critical issues interacting and perhaps competing for the global funds? And to Mr. Robert, as a private entity, how do you see this situation impact the sustainability issues in the business?
I think my perspective is a bit different from both Professor Isaac Dewan and Professor Lin. But as a businessman, of course, these green funding or the funding for the SDG would be very helpful. But as a businessman, I don't need any preferential financing or prioritized financing for this sustainable development from my position. These sustainable development is not something you can ask a selected group of people to do. I think everybody has to take part in doing sustainable development. And I presented the cases of my company, Turasarma Group, but we are not the only ones. There are many very responsible business actors in Indonesia and globally making differences in the lives of people and in the lives in the environment. So all I wish for is for the global society not to have stigmatism, not to try to block the activities that these responsible and businesses are doing, and that would help us to do our parts in making this development more sustainable and more helpful for the people in developing countries.
I'd like to direct the questions to Mr. Robertson on the transition from the business as usual to the green economy. Perhaps you faced some trade-off between the environmental costs and economic benefits before you can achieve sustainable economy. Do you have something to share with us about this?
Well, I think Professor Ishak Dewan touched upon a very important point. Obviously, there has to be some kind of a trade-off, and the very needed directed subsidy is, of course, very important, and it will be very instrumental. But basically, let me just again talk about Papua. If you look at Papua, my figure could be a little off, but I believe Papua is a huge island, but 98% of Papua has a forest cover. Only about 2% of the whole landmass is developed, meaning it has housings, some factories, buildings, roads, and whatnot. And according to the government plan, only 6% of the whole landmass is slated to be developed. But it's not being developed. One of the reasons, some of the reasons are, as I explained before, but another reason is because the global society, and when I say global society, I mean mostly the environmental NGOs from the developed nations, are against development of these forests because these are the natural resources that are critical for human life. But at the same time, this REDD plus is also being blocked. And so the concept of REDD, the carbon emission credit from the REDD plus is basically gone, thrown out the window now. So how are people of Papua going to develop and alleviate all the problems of hunger, poverty, the healthcare issues? So if the basic needs are not met for the people, environmental issues for them would be something of less importance. So I hope that the international community understands that dire needs for development for the people of developing countries, and especially for places of hugely underdeveloped places like Papua.